The unexpected observer. Dr. Sarah Chen brushed the red dust from her hands as she carefully lifted another fragment of alien technology from the excavation site. The piece was small, barely larger than her palm, but its surface held the same intricate patterns she'd seen on every other Vanguard artifact her team had uncovered. These weren't just decorative elements. They were functional, though their purpose had eluded humanity's best minds for years. The wind howled across the Martian landscape, carrying stinging particles of dust that rattled against her protective dome. The temporary shelter was the only thing standing between her and the harsh environment. Much like the massive planetary shields were all that stood between humanity and complete annihilation by the Vanguard fleet. Dr. Chen, her assistant's voice crackled through the comm. Military transport incoming. They're requesting immediate evacuation of the site. Sarah carefully packed the artifact in her collection case. Tell them I need 10 more minutes. She'd fought too hard to maintain access to this dig site to leave now, especially when she was so close to understanding something crucial about their enemies. The Vanguard had appeared 3 years ago, emerging from the depths of space with technology that made humanity's greatest achievements look like children's toys. Their ships could cross vast distances in the blink of an eye, their weapons could pierce any defense, and their shields seemed impenetrable. They'd taken system after system, pushing humanity back toward Earth with mechanical precision. But Sarah had noticed something in their artifacts, a pattern that didn't make sense. The Vanguard's technology was advanced, yes, but it was also rigid. Every piece followed the same design philosophy, down to the smallest detail. There was no variation, no evolution in their technical artifacts across thousands of years. The ground trembled as the military transport landed nearby. Sarah ignored it, focusing instead on the holographic display she'd set up to analyze the patterns. She'd fed thousands of images into her custom pattern recognition software, looking for something, anything, that might explain why such an advanced species would be so technologically stagnant. Dr. Chen. The voice behind her was firm, authoritative. This site is now under military jurisdiction. You need to leave immediately. Sarah turned to face Colonel Marcus Rivera, her longtime adversary in the battle between scientific research and military necessity. Colonel, I understand the situation, but I'm on the verge of something important here. These artifacts won't matter if we lose Mars. Rivera cut her off. The Vanguard fleet has broken through the outer system defenses. They'll be here within hours. Sarah's heart raced. All the more reason to let me finish. Colonel, look at this. She pulled up her latest analysis on the holographic display. Every piece of Vanguard technology we found follows the exact same patterns. Not similar, identical, down to the nanometer scale. That's not natural technological evolution. Rivera's expression remained stern, but she caught a flicker of interest in his eyes. Explain. Their technology doesn't show any signs of trial and error, no gradual improvements or variations. It's as if they were given these designs and have simply been replicating them ever since. And look at this. She pointed to a particular section of the pattern. These elements here, they serve no functional purpose. They're like signatures, copied over and over without understanding why. And this helps us how exactly? Sarah took a deep breath. Because it suggests the Vanguard aren't innovators. They're replicators. They don't understand their own technology, not really. They just follow the patterns they were given. And that means a deafening alarm cut through the air. Rivera's comm unit crackled to life. Sir, Vanguard ships detected entering the inner system. Multiple vessels, moving faster than predicted. Time to go, Doctor. Rivera grabbed Sarah's arm, but she pulled away, quickly downloading her data to a portable drive. Colonel, please, we need to get this information to your engineers. If I'm right, the Vanguard's greatest strength, their advanced technology, might also be their greatest weakness. They don't adapt, they don't improvise. They just follow the same patterns, over and over. The ground shook again, more violently this time. Through the dome's transparent sections, Sarah could see flashes of light in the sky. The battle for Mars had begun. Rivera studied her for a long moment, then nodded sharply. "You have 5 minutes to pack your essential data. After that, we leave, with or without you." Sarah worked quickly, her hands shaking as she gathered her most important findings. All around her, the evidence of her theory lay in the carefully excavated artifacts, each one a piece of a puzzle that might just save humanity. The Vanguard's technology wasn't magical or incomprehensible. It was just advanced engineering bound by rigid, unchanging rules. As she boarded the transport with Rivera, watching her research site disappear into the swirling red dust of Mars, Sarah clutched her data drive tightly. The Vanguard might be more advanced, but humans had something they didn't: the ability to look at problems from new angles, to question established patterns, to innovate and adapt. The transport lifted off, racing for orbit as the first shots of the battle for Mars lit up the sky. Sarah watched through the viewport, her mind racing with possibilities. The Vanguard had been copying the same designs for thousands of years. But humanity had gone from horse-drawn carriages to starships in just a few centuries. Maybe that was the key to defeating them. Not by trying to match their technology, but by thinking in ways they couldn't or wouldn't. Sarah opened her laptop and began writing her report. She had to make the military understand before it was too late. The fate of humanity might depend not on who had the most advanced technology, but on who could use it in ways no one had ever imagined before. Pattern recognition. The emergency command center beneath Luna Base hummed with nervous energy. Holographic displays showed the steady advance of Vanguard forces through the solar system, their ships moving with the same precise, predictable patterns they always used. Sarah Chen stood before the gathered military leadership, her research data projected behind her. "Look at their attack formations," she pointed to the tactical display. "The same geometric patterns, repeated exactly, regardless of our defensive positions. They're not adapting to our strategies. They're following a script." Admiral Helena Wong leaned forward, her weathered face illuminated by the holographic glow. "Dr. Chen, we've lost 4 colony worlds and Mars in the past month. With respect, how does knowing their ships move in patterns help us stop them?" Sarah advanced her presentation to show the artifact analysis. Because it's not just their movements. Everything about the Vanguard is pattern-based. Their technology, their tactics, their responses, all of it follows preset rules. They're like a massive computer program, running the same code over and over. "That's impossible," General Thompson interrupted. "No species could advance to their level without the ability to innovate. Unless," Sarah countered, "they didn't develop this technology themselves. My analysis suggests the Vanguard are using inherited technology, designs they've preserved but don't fully understand. That's why there's no variation, no improvement over time. They're replicating, not creating." The room erupted in murmured discussions. Admiral Wong raised her hand for silence. "Assume you're right, Doctor. How does this help us defend Earth?" Sarah took a deep breath. This was the crucial moment. Because patterns can be predicted, and more importantly, disrupted. The Vanguard's greatest strength, their advanced technology, is also their greatest weakness. They don't know how to operate outside their programmed responses. She pulled up new data, showing analysis of recent battles. "Look at their shield technology. Everyone assumes their shields are impenetrable because they've never failed. But what if they're not failing because we're not actually testing them? We see their defensive patterns and retreat, exactly as they expect us to." Colonel Rivera, who had supported her research since Mars, stepped forward. "Dr. Chen believes we've been playing into their expectations, fighting exactly the way they're programmed to counter." "So what do you suggest?" Thompson asked, skepticism heavy in his voice. "We just ignore centuries of military doctrine." "Yes," Sarah said firmly. "Because that doctrine was developed for fighting human opponents who can adapt and improvise. The Vanguard can't. They don't know how." She brought up her final slides, showing the strange, repeating patterns in Vanguard technology. These aren't just decorative. They're instructions, literally written into every piece of their technology. But they're not complete instructions. They're more like checksums, validation patterns. If something doesn't match these patterns exactly, their systems don't know how to respond. Admiral Wong's eyes narrowed. You're suggesting we could confuse their technology by not playing by their rules. More than confuse it, Sarah said. I think we could make it fail completely. But we'd have to be willing to try tactics that seem completely irrational by our standards. The room fell silent as the implications sank in. The holographic displays continued showing the Vanguard fleet's advance, their ships moving in perfect, predictable formations. We'd need to test this theory, Thompson said slowly. If you're wrong. If I'm wrong. We lose nothing, Sarah countered. We're losing anyway, fighting them on their terms. But if I'm right. She let the thought hang in the air. Admiral Wong studied the tactical displays for a long moment. How quickly could we modify our ships to implement your ideas? That's the beauty of it, Sarah said, allowing herself a small smile. We don't need to match their technology. We just need to make our technology do things their patterns say are impossible. Their systems won't know how to respond. She brought up a new simulation. Look at their battle formations. They always maintain perfect geometric spacing, even under fire. What if we intentionally created chaotic, random patterns? Their targeting systems are programmed to predict logical movement. What if we moved illogically? You want us to fight like madmen, Thompson said. I want us to fight like humans, Sarah corrected. Unpredictable, innovative, willing to try the impossible. Everything the Vanguard are not. Rivera stepped forward again. We've confirmed Dr. Chen's analysis of their communication patterns. They use the same frequencies, the same encryption, never varying. If she's right about their rigid programming, we could disrupt their entire command structure, Wong finished. How soon can you have a detailed proposal ready? Sarah glanced at her datapad. I already have it prepared. But Admiral, we need to act quickly. The Vanguard fleet will reach Earth's defense perimeter in less than 2 weeks. Wong nodded sharply. Colonel Rivera, assemble a test group. Volunteer crews only. I won't order anyone to try something this unorthodox. Dr. Chen, you'll work directly with our tactical teams to implement your ideas. As the meeting broke up, Sarah felt a mix of relief and anxiety. They were finally listening. But would it be enough? The weight of her theory, and potentially the fate of humanity, pressed down on her. Rivera caught up with her in the corridor. That went better than expected. Sarah nodded, clutching her datapad. Now comes the hard part. We have to convince ship crews to intentionally do everything wrong, tactically speaking. To trust that the Vanguard's inability to handle chaos will protect them better than conventional strategy. You really think this will work? Sarah watched the bustling activity of the command center, humans adapting and innovating in real time as new information came in. Look at them, she said softly. Every person here is thinking, creating, trying new approaches. When something fails, they try something else. The Vanguard can't do that. They can only follow their patterns. She turned to Rivera. We've been so focused on matching their technology that we forgot our greatest strength, our ability to do the unexpected. The Vanguard's perfect predictability is their perfect weakness. We just have to be brave enough to exploit it. Then we better get to work, Rivera said. Because brave or not, the Vanguard are coming. And this time, we need to show them something they've never seen before. Sarah nodded, her mind already racing with possibilities. The Vanguard had never faced an enemy who understood their fundamental nature. They'd never fought opponents who could see the patterns that bound them. Most importantly, they'd never encountered a species willing to abandon logic and embrace chaos as a weapon. It was time to show them why humanity had survived countless disasters, wars, and challenges. Not because we were stronger or more advanced, but because we could always find a new way to fight, even if that way seemed completely insane. Breaking point. The bridge of the UES Audacity thrummed with tension as Sarah Chen watched the tactical display. The experimental squadron, 5 destroyers and 3 cruisers, hung in space near Jupiter's orbit, waiting. They'd stripped down their ship's systems, removing layers of automation that might inadvertently create the kind of patterns the Vanguard could predict. Contact. The sensor officer's voice was tight. Multiple Vanguard signatures entering detection range. Captain Maya Rodriguez, who had volunteered her ship for this insane experiment, looked at Sarah. "Ready to test your theory, Doctor?" Sarah nodded, though her throat felt dry. "Remember, everything we do has to seem random, unpredictable. The moment we fall into recognizable patterns, we lose our advantage." The Vanguard fleet emerged from hyperspace in their usual perfect formation, a geometric arrangement that would have been beautiful if it wasn't so deadly. 30 ships against their 8. Under normal circumstances, it would have been a slaughter. "All ships," Rodriguez commanded. "Execute Chaos Protocol Alpha." The human squadron exploded into motion, each ship moving in seemingly random directions. They'd drilled for weeks, learning to fight by instinct rather than training, to break every rule of space combat. The Vanguard response was immediate, and exactly what Sarah had predicted. Their ships maintained their perfect formation, their targeting systems trying to establish solutions on vessels that refused to move in logical patterns. "They're firing," the tactical officer reported, "but their accuracy is down 60%. Sarah leaned forward, watching the data streams. The Vanguard weapons were more powerful, their shields stronger, but their targeting systems were built around predictive algorithms. When faced with truly random movement, they couldn't compensate. "Phase 2, Rodriguez ordered. "Let's show them something really impossible." The human ships began broadcasting on random frequencies, jumping between channels faster than any normal communication system could handle. They fired weapons with deliberately varied power levels, created shield harmonics that changed every microsecond. On the tactical display, Sarah watched the Vanguard formation begin to show signs of confusion. Their responses, always so precise before, began to lag. "It's working," she breathed. "Their systems can't process what we're doing because it doesn't match any of their programmed patterns." A Vanguard cruiser suddenly broke formation, something Sarah had never seen before. Its weapons fire went wild, missing targets by impossible margins. "They're trying to adapt," Rodriguez said, "but they don't know how. All ships, increase chaos level. I want every action to be completely unpredictable." The human squadron dove deeper into apparent madness. Ships fired their engines in short, random bursts, tumbling through space in ways that defied tactical sense. They launched missiles that corkscrewed in bizarre patterns, making them harder for Vanguard point defense systems to track. "Vanguard shields are fluctuating," the sensor officer reported. "Their power distribution is becoming erratic." Sarah's hands gripped the console. This was the moment of truth, if her theory about their technology was correct. "All ships," Rodriguez commanded, "converge on target Alpha. Random attack pattern, maximum disruption." The human squadron swarmed the nearest Vanguard cruiser, each ship approaching from a different vector, their weapons fire creating a chaotic web of energy. The Vanguard vessel's shields flared, trying to adapt to attacks that followed no logical pattern. Then suddenly, they failed completely. Direct hits. The tactical officer's voice rose with excitement. "Enemy vessel disabled." The bridge erupted in cheers, but Sarah kept her focus on the data. "Look at their fleet response. They're still trying to maintain formation even though it's clearly not working. They can't break free of their programming." More Vanguard ships began showing signs of system failure as the human squadron pressed their advantage. Ships that had seemed invincible just hours ago were now struggling to cope with attacks that defied their fundamental understanding of combat. "Message from Admiral Wong," the comm officer announced. "They're watching the battle telemetry. We're ordered to push the attack, gather as much data as possible." Rodriguez grinned. Tell them we're about to gather a lot more. All ships, select new random targets. Let's show the vanguard what human creativity really looks like. The battle that followed would later be called the Chaos Gambit, the first major human victory against the vanguard. Ship after ship fell to attacks they couldn't predict or counter. Their perfect formations dissolved into confusion as their systems failed to process the seemingly random actions of their human opponents. Sarah watched it all, her theory proven in the most dramatic way possible. The vanguard weren't invincible. They were prisoners of their own perfection. Their inability to comprehend or adapt to chaos was their critical weakness. Vanguard fleet is in full retreat, the tactical officer reported. 11 ships destroyed, 7 disabled. No casualties on our side. The bridge fell silent as the implications sank in. They hadn't just won a battle. They'd discovered a way to fight back against an enemy that had seemed unstoppable. Dr. Chen, Rodriguez said quietly, I believe you just changed the course of the war. Sarah nodded slowly, watching the remaining vanguard ships flee in their stubbornly perfect formation. No, she replied. Humanity did. We just had to remember what makes us different from them. We're messy, unpredictable, creative. We break patterns instead of following them. Admiral Wong is requesting immediate transmission of all battle data, the comm officer reported. They're implementing chaos protocols fleet-wide. Sarah turned to Rodriguez. The vanguard will try to analyze what happened here. They'll look for patterns in our chaos, try to develop countermeasures. But they won't find any patterns, will they? Rodriguez smiled. Because next time, we'll do something completely different. Exactly. Sarah felt a weight lift from her shoulders. That's the real beauty of it. They can't prepare for what we'll do next, because we don't even know what we'll do next. Human unpredictability is our ultimate weapon. As the squadron regrouped and began its journey back to Earth, Sarah stared out at the stars. The vanguard had come to this war believing their superior technology made victory inevitable. They were about to learn that technology wasn't everything. Sometimes, the ability to think differently, to embrace chaos and uncertainty, was the greatest advantage of all. The human factor. The holographic war room deep beneath Luna Base had transformed in the weeks following the Jupiter engagement. Gone were the rigid tactical displays and formal battle plans. Instead, the walls crawled with chaos theory algorithms and randomized combat simulations. Officers who had once prided themselves on precision now competed to devise the most unpredictable strategies. Sarah Chen stood at the center of it all, watching humanity embrace its newfound advantage. The vanguard are adapting, she announced to the assembled command staff. Not quickly and not well, but they're trying. Admiral Wong nodded grimly. 3 victories in 2 weeks, but each one harder than the last. They're learning. No, Sarah corrected, pulling up battle footage. They're expanding their pattern library. Look at their responses, still rigid, still predictable. They're just adding new sequences to their playbook. Colonel Rivera stepped forward, which means they're still bound by their fundamental nature. They can add new patterns, but they can't break free of needing patterns. Exactly. Sarah highlighted a section of the display. But that's not what worries me. Look at their fleet movements. They're gathering their forces, combining into larger battle groups. They're trying to overwhelm our chaos strategies with sheer numbers. The room fell silent. The tactical display showed hundreds of vanguard ships converging near the outer system. More vessels than humanity had faced in any previous engagement. They're preparing for a decisive battle, Wong said quietly. One massive push to overcome our advantage through brute force. Sarah nodded, which means we need to escalate too. Not just tactical chaos, but strategic chaos. We need to do something they can't possibly have a pattern for. What did you have in mind? Rivera asked. Sarah took a deep breath. We need to stop fighting like a military force entirely. No fleet formations, no traditional command structures. Every ship, Every captain needs complete autonomy to act in the most unpredictable way possible. That's insane, General Thompson protested. You can't fight a war without command and control. The Vanguard can't fight a war without it, Sarah corrected. That's the difference. We can coordinate through chaos. They can't. She brought up her latest analysis. Look at their communication patterns. Even when adding new tactical responses, they still use the same rigid command protocols. Their entire military structure depends on perfect information flow, perfect obedience to programmed responses. And if we disrupt that structure, Wang began, their entire fleet could collapse into confusion. Sarah finished. But we have to be willing to do something unprecedented, something that goes against every military doctrine we've ever created. The room erupted in debate. Officers argued about risks and responsibilities, about centuries of military tradition versus the need to survive. Sarah waited, watching the tactical display as more Vanguard ships joined the gathering fleet. Finally, Admiral Wang raised her hand for silence. Dr. Chen, you've been right about everything so far. What exactly are you proposing? Sarah activated a new simulation. Operation Wildcard. We dissolve our fleet structure completely. Every ship becomes an independent unit, free to attack when and how they choose. No patterns, no coordination, just pure chaos theory in action. That's not a military, Thompson objected. That's anarchy. Exactly, Sarah smiled. And that's why it will work. The Vanguard can't conceptualize a force that operates without patterns. Their entire understanding of warfare is based on predictable cause and effect. She highlighted different sections of the tactical display. We split our forces into hundreds of small, autonomous groups. Each one acts randomly, attacking from different vectors, using different tactics. No ship ever does the same thing twice. The Vanguard's strength is their coordination, Rivera added, catching on. Their weakness is their reliance on that coordination. If we can make coordination impossible, we can drive their command structure into cascade failure. Sarah finished. Their ships will be individually stronger, but they won't be able to function as a fleet. Admiral Wang studied the simulation for a long moment. The risks are enormous. If we're wrong, we lose everything, Sarah acknowledged. But if we're right, we don't just win this battle. We break their ability to wage war entirely. The Admiral turned to her staff. Opinions? Rivera spoke first. We've proven Dr. Chen's basic theory works. Chaos beats patterns. This is just scaling up the concept. Our crews have already adapted to fighting unconventionally. Captain Rodriguez added from her position near the back. They're ready for this. Thompson shook his head. It goes against everything we know about military operations. That's why it will work, Sarah insisted. The Vanguard know everything we know about military operations. They've been studying us for years. But this, she gestured to the simulation of scattered, randomized forces. This they've never seen before. Wang straightened, her decision made. How long to implement? We've already been preparing the groundwork, Sarah revealed. Every ship in the fleet has been running chaos theory simulations. The crews are trained. We just need to pull the trigger. And the Vanguard fleet. Sarah checked the tactical data. At their current pace, they'll reach attack position in 72 hours. Then we have 72 hours to tear up every military manual ever written, Wang declared. Colonel Rivera, begin fleet dispersal. Captain Rodriguez, I want your chaos protocols distributed to every ship. Dr. Chen. Yes, Admiral. Pray you're right about this, because we're about to bet humanity's survival on the power of pure chaos. As the command staff rushed to implement the plan, Sarah stared at the tactical display. Soon, the largest space battle in human history would begin. But it wouldn't be fought with traditional tactics or strategies. It would be fought with randomness, with unpredictability, with the uniquely human ability to embrace chaos. The Vanguard were coming with their perfect formations and programmed responses. They were about to learn that perfection wasn't always an advantage. Sometimes, the ability to throw away the rulebook and act completely irrationally was the most powerful weapon of all. Victory through understanding. Sarah Chen watched the tactical display as humanity's scattered fleet waited in the darkness of space. The ships weren't grouped in formations or battle lines. Instead, they drifted in seemingly random positions throughout the solar system. Each captain had complete autonomy, each crew prepared to act without orders or coordination. The Vanguard fleet arrived exactly as predicted, emerging from hyperspace in a perfect geometric pattern. Over 800 ships, the largest alien force ever assembled in the solar system. Their formation was a masterpiece of military precision, a testament to their technological superiority. And that's exactly what would destroy them. All ships, Admiral Wong's voice was calm over the fleet-wide channel. Execute Operation Wildcard. No coordination, no patterns. Show them what chaos really means. The human fleet exploded into action. Ships accelerated in random directions, their movements defying any tactical logic. Weapons fired at unpredictable power levels. Communication frequencies shifted randomly. Shield harmonics fluctuated without pattern. The Vanguard response was immediate, and exactly what Sarah had predicted. Their perfect formation tried to adapt, tried to find patterns in the chaos that surrounded them. Their targeting systems searched for logic where none existed. Look at their command and control patterns. Sarah pointed to the analysis display. They're trying to coordinate their response, but each ship is getting different data about what they're facing. Their systems can't reconcile the contradictions. On the main tactical display, the battle unfolded like nothing ever seen in military history. Human ships darted through the Vanguard formation, each one acting independently, each one creating its own sphere of chaos. There was no front line, no clear objective, no way to predict where the next attack would come from. Vanguard fleet showing signs of command disruption. The tactical officer reported. Their formation is breaking down. Sarah leaned forward, watching the data streams. The Vanguard ships were still individually powerful, still technically superior in every way. But their rigid programming, their absolute dependence on patterns and predictability, was becoming their undoing. They're trying to establish new patterns, she observed. But they can't keep up. Every time they identify a pattern in our movements, our ships are already doing something completely different. The battle spread across the solar system as human vessels led Vanguard pursuers on random courses, breaking their formation into smaller and smaller groups. Each alien ship tried to follow its programming, tried to find logic in the swirling chaos around them. Multiple Vanguard ships showing critical system failures, the sensor officer called out. Their power distribution networks are collapsing from conflicting commands. Admiral Wong nodded grimly. They're trying to process too many contradictions. Their systems are designed for perfect coordination, perfect pattern recognition. When faced with true randomness, they fall apart, Sarah finished. Their technology can't handle situations their programmers never imagined possible. The tactical display told the story. Vanguard ships, their systems overwhelmed by chaos, began shutting down. Others fired blindly into space, their targeting systems unable to lock onto vessels that refused to follow predictable paths. The mighty alien fleet was dissolving into confusion. "Ma'am," the communications officer turned from his station. "We're picking up something strange. The Vanguard ships, they're beginning to broadcast on open frequencies." "Let's hear it," Wong ordered. The bridge speakers crackled with alien transmissions. Sarah's eyes widened as she recognized the patterns, or rather, the lack of them. "They're breaking free," she whispered. "Their programming, it's failing completely. They're trying to communicate without their standard protocols." The Vanguard fleet's disintegration accelerated. Ships stopped firing, their crews apparently unable to function without the patterns that had guided them for generations. Others simply drifted, their systems locked in endless loops as they tried to process situations they were never designed to handle. "All ships, hold position," Wong commanded. "Let's see what they do." The human fleet pulled back, maintaining their random positions but ceasing their attacks. For long moments, space was silent except for the continuing cascade of confused Vanguard transmissions. Then, a single signal cut through the chaos. Unlike the rigid, pattern-bound communications they were used to, this one was different. Simple. Almost human. They wished to discuss terms, the communications officer reported, surprise evident in his voice. In their own words, not using standard protocols. Sarah felt tears in her eyes as she understood what had happened. "We didn't just break their military capability," she said softly. "We broke their programming. Showed them there was another way to think, to act, to exist." Admiral Wong studied the tactical display, where Vanguard ships hung motionless in space, their perfect formations forgotten. "You're saying we did more than defeat them. We freed them." Their entire civilization was bound by patterns, Sarah explained, built on rigid protocols and programming passed down for generations. But chaos, true chaos, it showed them those patterns weren't necessary, that they could think for themselves. The bridge fell silent as the implications sank in. They had come expecting a battle to save humanity. Instead, they had fought a battle that might have saved two species. "Admiral," the communications officer spoke again, "more Vanguard ships are sending messages. They're different, individual. Some are asking questions about how we think, how we make decisions without patterns." Wong turned to Sarah. "Dr. Chen, it seems your expertise is still needed, not just in understanding their technology, but in helping them understand us." Sarah nodded, watching as more Vanguard ships began broadcasting their own unique, pattern-free messages. "That's the real victory," she said quietly. "Not defeating them, but showing them what they could become. What any species can become when they break free of their limitations and embrace new possibilities." The war ended not with a final battle, but with a beginning. The Vanguard, their rigid programming, shattered by human chaos, began the long process of learning to think freely. And humanity, having faced extinction, discovered that its greatest strength wasn't technology or military might, but the ability to show others that patterns were meant to be broken. Sarah Chen would spend the next several years helping the Vanguard understand what she had understood from the start. That true advancement comes not from following predetermined paths, but from having the courage to forge new ones. That sometimes the most powerful force in the universe isn't order or pattern, but the beautiful unpredictability of free will. And in the end, that was humanity's greatest victory. Not conquering an enemy, but liberating them. Showing them that the universe was full of possibilities they had never imagined, waiting for those brave enough to embrace the chaos and make it their own.